Hello and welcome to my channel. This is Dr. Dawn Michael, and today I'm going to discuss with you sexual issues dealing with fetishes, how to manage them. Some people want to know how to get rid of them, how they start, why some people have them, and some different thoughts on that topic. The last video that I did was on the subject of pedophilia. And I got some comments that I really don't agree with. And I will tell you that pedophilia is categorized as a sexual fetish. It is not something that you are born with. It's not like they want to compare it to someone being born straight or someone being born homosexual, where they say that they are simply born having an attraction to a younger person. The reality of this is people develop fetishes throughout their lives, and many times that fetish gets more solidified by the age of 12, 13, somewhere in there when puberty kicks in. The thought gets stuck in a person's head. And this could be that they had witnessed something prior to puberty, something had happened to them, they had had some thoughts about this, and then it simply got stuck in their brain, and now they think about it over and over again. And especially with men, the testosterone kicks in, it's something that they masturbate to, and so it becomes part of their sexual pattern. I also talked about, especially if you have been involved in some type of trauma or abuse younger, your body will actually remember that experience, both mentally and physically. And as you become an adult, that can be part of your sexual pattern. This is also where it gets really confusing when I've worked with people that have had some type of sexual trauma as a child. As they become adults, in order to get turned on, in some ways they're still thinking about that trauma, and that's what's turning them on as an adult. And with that comes shame and confusion and not knowing how to actually have a healthy sexual experience. So this all goes hand in hand together. I know I'm combining different things here, but when we're talking about sexuality, it's really complicated. It's not something where you can just put things in categories. That's where it kind of irritates me a little bit, because on one hand, someone may refer to it as a sexuality, which it's not a sexuality. It's a pattern. It's what you desire. It's what turns you on. It's what turns your body on, your brain on, your response to something that is either visual. It could even be a scent of something. It could be something that you hear. All of this plays into it. It could be a particular touch. Some people can get turned on to when some music goes on. I've worked with people where certain words can trigger a sexual response. So all of this is quite vast, and for many people, it's quite confusing. And when it comes down to somebody having a sexual attraction to something, or some type of a fetish where they just feel this incredible need or desire to do it, oftentimes, if it involves another person or they're in a relationship, this is really where the problem arises. Now, if you're having fantasies, you're by yourself, it's not involving somebody else, it really doesn't matter what you think about, because you're not acting on it. And so I'm not even going to talk about that. If you think about something, those are your thoughts, But if it's something that's getting in the way of having a good, solid relationship, or if, of course, you're hurting somebody else, that's never okay. or even if you are in some ways manipulating someone to get involved with you or putting your ideas onto another person. I hear this a lot when somebody has some type of a sexual fetish or a sexual desire. They oftentimes think that maybe the person that they're with feels the same way, or if they see that they might be interested in them talking about it, they want to do this themselves. Oftentimes, when I'm working with somebody who's been in not a cuckold relationship, but has a cuckold fantasy, for instance, where they're married and maybe they bring something up in the heat of sex with their spouse, and all of a sudden, maybe their spouse reacts to it or seems to get turned on, then they think, oh, they really must want to move to the next step, or they may really feel that way about it. And oftentimes, that's not the case at all. They don't feel that way. They're just responding in the moment. And so you have to understand, if you have some type of a sexual desire towards something, a sexual feeling, it's yours and yours alone. It is not the other person's. And if you're watching porn, or maybe you've been involved in something prior to the relationship, you also have to understand that those are your experience. You've had a mind expansion in some ways. You've allowed Pandora's box to open, and it's not something that you can put back in. But perhaps the other person's never experienced it. They have no idea what it feels like. So for you, expecting them to understand it or even have the same turn on is completely unrealistic. So the point that I really want to make is that you do have control. Oftentimes there is this excuse that you have no control, again, that you're born with it, or that it somehow came into your life, and now that is the only way that you can get turned on. You have to either see it visually, you have to do it physically, or you have to think about it to get aroused. Now that would be really talking about a fetish, because let's say somebody has a turn on for, I don't know, high heels, or somebody gets turned on by leather, the smell of leather. I mean, there's so many different things that people can get turned on by, but yet that's the only thing that turns them on sexually. See, that's the difference. They can't get sexually excited without that particular turn on. And that's really what the problem is. And so in replacing that, it's very difficult, because what else is going to create that, heightened sexual response, or what else is going to replace that if somebody's trying to replace it? So for instance, let's say, again, I'll go back to the cuckolding, only because I have so many people that view my station, and that I've also worked with couples on this particular idea. The man has an intense turn on from cuckolding. And that would be, he gets turned on by his wife having sex with other men, talking about it, and there's lots of different subcategories of that. But now that's the only thing that's turning him on. You see, that's the only thing that gets him excited. That's a problem, because now he has really created this scenario where he needs that stimulus to want to have sex, to get an erection, maintain an erection, and doesn't really know how to get out of that situation. And yes, you can. So it's not that you are doomed or that you can't get out of the situation. And oftentimes, if you can remove yourself slowly from it and try to replace it with something else that turns you on, there are ways to work through this. For instance, part of the turn on for many men with the cuckolding is there is a certain aspect of domination that takes place, where maybe he likes to feel humiliated, he likes to be dominated by his wife. So you don't necessarily have to now go into the actual cuckold where you're watching her with someone else. You can now tame it. You can now reel it in, and maybe then you can ask her to just talk about that, and that will turn you on. So you're slowly moving away from just one thing that turns you on, and now you're able to slowly move into something else. And that's how this process begins, of kind of getting away from that one turn on, which is destroying your life. Because many times people say, I just want to get rid of it. I can't handle it anymore. It's ruining my relationship. I can't meet anybody. And obviously, I'm not talking about people who are fine with it, because I get those comments too, where they're saying, oh, there's nothing wrong with it. I have this great relationship, blah, blah, blah. Great, good for you. That's fine. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to people who are really struggling with it, and it is really destroying their life, and they want to change it. So the way you go about changing it is slowly, and you slowly bring something else into it. And the other thing too is if you're spending hours a day watching porn or thinking about it, then you need to stop doing that. You need to take the device that you're watching the porn on and get rid of it or delete the stuff. You need to first slowly set a time where you're watching it only a certain amount of time. Maybe replace it with some other thoughts that turn you on, because it's training your mind. Now, if you were able to get yourself into it, you can eventually get yourself out of it. And that's where the argument comes into place. Oh, I was born with it, or it just happened upon me, which literally puts the person in a victimized. So there's nothing they can do about it. They can't go about changing it because it's in their DNA. That's not true. Okay, you can do behavior modification on many things, but it takes time, it takes persistence, and it takes an understanding that you can change it. The more that you watch something, the more you get used to it. And also when it comes to porn, because porn has become so extreme, it's like somebody could get turned on watching one thing, and then all of a sudden it doesn't turn them on anymore. So they're looking for something else to spike their adrenaline, to turn them on, and that's not a good thing. That's something that you have to learn how to put boundaries on, and you have to learn how to control that, because that will end up consuming you. So we're talking about cost benefit here. So you have to weigh things out. How much time are you spending in your fantasy watching the porn or thinking about it or doing it, as opposed to doing something productive and positive in your life? If you see that you're spending more time doing the negative, which would be overindulging in the fantasy and so on and so forth, it's really not cost prohibitive, because what are you doing with your life? Are you spending hours a day masturbating, not working on your life, maybe not involved in your family? This is not healthy, and you're not really utilizing each day in a positive way. So you need to get a hold of that, and you need to come to terms with it, and you need to be real with yourself. So set yourself up a schedule. Decrease the time that you're viewing it or that you're doing it. Replace it with something else. It doesn't even have to be something sexual. It could be exercise. It could be a hobby. It could be anything that's going to cut back on the time. So you slowly have to unravel it and work your way through it. I will tell you, when I am working with someone who's really committed to changing their fetish, or decreasing their fetish, or improving their life, it's a process, and it takes a while, but it is achievable. It's not that it's not achievable, it is. And people work in different ways. Some people replace it with something spiritual. Some people replace it with a new hobby in their life. Some people replace it with a different activity. Each person is different. So I wouldn't say, start replacing your continual thoughts about your fetish or whatever you're thinking about with something that someone else is doing, because it may not work for you. You really have to figure out what works for you, and try it. So I kind of just went a little bit of a rant there, but I think it's important because I think a lot of people justify their actions, and that's what gets them into a situation they can't get out of. Because if you justify what you're doing and then you realize you're miserable, but then you continue to justify it, the behavior just stays the same. So you really have to take responsibility for it, and each day is a new day. Some days are harder than other days, but if you really just start replacing it slowly with something that feels good, that you feel proud of, and then limit the time. That's really how to do it. And if you can get help, all the more to you. It's great if you can get some help with it, stay on track, and have somebody there that can explain things to you. And that's part of what I do with my clients is I help them get through the beginning stages of it, so that they can get started and they can actually have a life. Sometimes these fantasies, these things consume people and they just don't have a great quality of life, or they've destroyed their relationships, they've destroyed themselves financially, and who wants to live that? Who wants to live that type of a life where you're constantly, in misery until you get your sexual release or you think about it? I mean, that's really not a healthy, productive lifestyle. All right, if you like my video, please give me a thumbs up, leave your comment, subscribe to my channel, and as you know, I believe everyone deserves to have a healthy sex life, and so do you.